So our story doesn't start with a thick classified binder. It starts with intuition, necessity, and a basketball-sized fear of intelligence overload. In 1946, in the early days of the Cold War, the United States faced a new challenge: a rapidly shifting global order, espionage networks, satellite-age signals, and every president, every White House, every leader handles the PDB differently. Usage and trust vary, sometimes dramatically. So picture this. It's 6 a.m. in the White House. The halls are still, the air is hushed, and the nation is only just beginning to wake. A secure courier approaches the Oval Office. In hand, a slim folder, confidential, top secret, and inside, the most sensitive intelligence reports the U.S. government has assembled. And what are those reports? Cyber threats targeting critical infrastructure, covert diplomatic maneuvers in unstable regions, satellite observations over foreign military deployments, warning signs of crisis, fresh conflicts, shifting alliances, clandestine operations abroad, and so much more. This is the President's Daily Brief, the PDB, the ultimate intelligence file. For decades, it has shaped global policy, steered war decisions, even helped prevent catastrophe. Yet the PDB is far more complex than the public imagines, and behind it lies a web of institutional practices, trade-offs, and evolving assumptions. Welcome to Threat Level Red. I'm your host, Charles Denyer. Today, we go deep into the PDB, how it started, how it works, how presidents actually use it, and why it still matters.
Welcome to Threat Level Red, a Charles Denyer Productions podcast. Every week, Charles brings his real-world expertise to the front lines of America's most pressing threats: cyber attacks, extremist networks, rogue states, terrorism, economic instability, systemic breakdowns, and so much more. From the digital battleground to the streets of America, no threat is left uncovered. No spin, no filters, just intel.
So our story doesn't start with a thick classified binder. It starts with intuition, necessity, and a basketball-sized fear of intelligence overload. In 1946, in the early days of the Cold War, the United States faced a new challenge: a rapidly shifting global order, espionage networks, satellite-age signals, and nuclear threats. Leaders needed reliable, timely intelligence, but also brevity. The intelligence community wrestled with an overcrowded flow of data: military reports, diplomatic cables, raw signals, agency memos, and more. By the 1950s, under President Dwight Eisenhower, the idea of a daily intelligence digest was beginning to take shape. But the real breakthrough came under John F. Kennedy.
I've said as much as I feel can be usefully said by me in regard to the events of the past few days. Further statements, detailed discussions.
In June 1961, after the chaos of the failed Bay of Pigs invasion, Kennedy demanded a new kind of intelligence product, something digestible, portable, and timely. The result was the first brief, the President's Intelligence Checklist, known as the Pickle, a 7-page, pocket-sized booklet delivered on June 17, 1961. That first issue included 14 short briefs covering global hotspots, from Soviet leadership changes to developments in Cuba. It even came with maps. Kennedy's goal was simple: have a pocket brief so concise so the President of the United States could carry it with him wherever he went. And over the following years, that very checklist evolved. On December 1st, 1964, under President Lyndon Baines Johnson, the staple format was replaced by what would formally become the PDB, the President's Daily Brief. The new brief retained brevity, but gradually added depth, such as longer articles, deeper analysis, and more structured content. As the Cold War intensified and global hotspots multiplied, the PDB became the daily plate on which presidents read the world's pulse. But while it evolved, one of its defining traits remained: it was always tailored to the preference of each president. When a new president replaces the old, the PDB changes shape, its language, layout, even delivery format adapts. That adaptation, born from urgency and filtered through personality, continues to this day. Now, close your eyes and picture the Oval Office, 7 a.m., coffee in hand, slip of paper, or an electronic tablet in front of you. 30 pages or less, yet carrying the weight of a world's worth of secrets. And inside the PDB lies the following: alerts about global geopolitical shifts, military intelligence, cyber intelligence, diplomatic signals, covert operation updates, and much more. Every paragraph is the product of multiple agency involvement: the CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the NSA, the State Department, and more, all merged and put together by the staff under the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the ODNI. Yet illusions about how the PDB arrives and how it's consumed are rampant. For many, the mental image is a senior CIA officer knocking on the Oval Office door each morning and walking the president through every item. However, reality is quite different. In fact, many presidents seldom received in-person briefings on the PDB. The early versions under Kennedy and Johnson were nearly always reviewed privately or discussed with the president's national security advisor and not somebody from the CIA. Under the Nixon and Ford administrations, the process shifted. PDBs were printed on legal-sized paper, as for Nixon's preference, and at times delivered as both morning and afternoon editions, especially during crisis periods. From January to April 1969, for example, the CIA provided both morning and late-note editions to accommodate rapid developments. And direct CIA briefings became more common under President Ford. Previously, the primary briefers were advisors from the National Security Council and not the CIA. And later, presidents adapted delivery to modern convenience. Under Barack Obama, the PDB shifted from printed binders to secure digital delivery as tablets began replacing paper in 2014. Other leaders preferred summaries, bullet points, or met with briefers only occasionally, depending on appetite, time, and style. So, while the PDB remains a daily facility, the way it reaches the President of the United States varies widely with each administration and personal preference. It's real tempting to think of the PDB as the President's single gateway to global intelligence. But the system is more like a vast interconnected web, and the PDB is only one strand of many. Here's how it actually works. On any given day, intelligence flows in from satellite surveillance, electronic intercepts, human informants, diplomatic dispatches, allied intelligence agencies, military recon, open source reporting, and more. Analysts then sift through these streams, compare data, cross-validate, contextualize, and estimate. They debate probabilities, highlight anomalies, and frame risks. Then the ODNI, the Office of Director of National Intelligence, along with agency liaisons, then adjudicates what makes it into the PDB. Priority issues, emerging threats, strategic warnings, context, long-term trends, and more. On some days, that might be 6 or 7 articles. On others, perhaps just a handful, but each is targeted, focused, and urgency filtered. Outside the PDB, the President receives real-time intel as required: situation room alerts, agency to White House calls, military briefings, ad hoc memos, diplomatic cables, crisis summaries, in-person intel briefings when needed, and more. In short, the PDB is a snapshot, not a full motion picture. Important, yes, incredibly important, but always part of a bigger, broader, continuous intelligence ecosystem, and that's something very important to remember. Every president, every White House, every leader handles the PDB differently. Usage and trust vary, sometimes dramatically. For Kennedy, the president's intelligence checklist, the pickle, was indispensable, as it allowed him to keep a finger on the pulse of international events while juggling domestic politics. The compact format was exactly what he needed to stay informed without being overwhelmed. Under Presidents Nixon and Ford, the volume of global events, Cold War crisis, Middle East flashpoints, Vietnam, all demanded changes. As a result, the PDB grew longer, included tables of contents, and even multiple daily editions, especially when time-sensitive events unfolded. Nixon's legal-size printouts and Ford's request for a CIA briefer reflect how delivery and format shifted with need. As for President Reagan, he often opted to review the PDB in private or rely on summaries interpreted by advisors, rather than sitting through a full CIA debrief. Both George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush had distinctive approaches to the PDB. George H.W. Bush, with his CIA background, preferred a thorough, hands-on reading, absorbing the written brief personally and valuing direct engagement with intelligence officers. George W. Bush, by contrast, often relied on concise summaries rather than the full document, shaping his decision-making around what he could digest quickly. Vice President Dick Cheney told me that he frequently saw the PDB before the president did. At George W. Bush's direction, Cheney would review the intelligence first, highlighting what he deemed most critical. This gave him the crucial role in filtering and framing information for the president. Critics argued it concentrated power in the vice president's hand, while supporters insisted it was a practical way to manage life-or-death intelligence.
Put together a list of states, given our concern of weapons of mass destruction, states that have supported terrorists in the past.
The Clinton years saw the PDB providing strategic context for the Balkan conflicts, growing terrorism, post-war global shifts, and more. In many interviews, Clinton described the PDB as giving him the majority of what he needed to make day-to-day decisions.
States have applied for this assistance, and FEMA verifies the need. This will allow ambulances, fire
Under
trucks,
President
and other
Obama,
emergency workers
the move to secure
job.
digital delivery, which was tablet-based, allowed for more flexible reading on the road, during travel, early in the morning or late at night. But it also meant the president's exposure to real-time intel broadened beyond paper. And as for Trump, the PDB was never the sacred morning ritual it had been for many presidents before him. Intelligence officers recounted that he rarely read the written brief, often bypassing it entirely for ultra-short oral summaries built around visuals and headlines. One former briefer put it bluntly, Trump doesn't really read anything. At one point, his schedule showed he attended just 17 intel briefings over 85 days. Critics inside the intel community warned that skipping the fuller written reports left dangerous gaps in nuance and context, while Trump supporters insisted he was simply processing intelligence in his own style. Regardless of the flair or flavor of the PDB, its influence has always depended on one thing: whether the president chooses to engage with it and how. Trust in intelligence, appetite for depth, tolerance for uncertainty, these shape how seriously the PDB is taken. For some presidents, it was a central pillar of decision-making. For others, a background tool, consulted when needed, ignored when busy, and filtered through layers of advisors. So the PDB is cloaked in secrecy, but it's not immune to controversy, leaks, or criticism. And the dangers often lie not in what's said, but in what's not said or only hinted. In 2015 and 2016, the Central Intelligence Agency publicly released roughly 5,000 previously classified documents, including PICLs and PDBs from the Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Ford administrations. The releases covered critical historical moments: the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Vietnam War, the 1967 Six-Day War in the Middle East, the 1968 Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia, and more. These documents revealed not only what leaders were told, but hints of what was omitted, what was classified, even from future historians. Some entries have entire paragraphs redacted. Some pages mention innocuous headings like Canada, but with entire sections blanked out. Historical clarity often bows to national security, as you can clearly see. Even with declassified briefs from the PICL and the PDB, researchers readily admit we'll never fully know what was communicated to presidents behind closed doors. The release versions are highly sanitized, annotated, and then sanitized again. Truth becomes a mosaic of fragments. And no matter how carefully crafted, the PDB can never capture every nuance. Intelligence is messy. Threats evolve rapidly. Analysis often lags by hours, sometimes days. A PDB prepared at 3 a.m. may be obsolete by sunrise. With all that said, you might wonder, in an age of instant communication, real-time surveillance, global news, and digital leaks, does a daily brief still matter? The answer, absolutely it does, 100%. Why? Number one, the modern world produces more data in a minute than the entire U.S. intelligence community did in 1960. Without a curated, prioritized digest, decision makers drown. The PDB distills thousands of data points into the highest priority, making actionable insights. Number two, much of the PDB's value lies not in delivering breaking news. but in detecting trends, exposing patterns, and signaling emerging danger. Cyber threats, foreign weaponization, covert influence campaigns, political destabilization. These often start small, build slowly, and explode unexpectedly. Number 3, because the PDB is archived, declassified selectively, and structured consistently, it serves as one of the few historical records of what the U.S. government knew, when it knew it, and how the knowledge changed. That record supports accountability, historical research, and lessons for the future. Number 4, beyond government, any business, NGO, or institution facing complex risks, such as cyber attacks, supply chain disruption, regulatory collapse, they can borrow the PDB's logic. Gather all relevant information, filter it, prioritize what's important, present it clearly to leadership, and revisit regularly. That's not just intelligence, it's survival. And it's probably the most single important thing that PDB offers the President of the United States. For decades, the PDB has helped presidents navigate global danger with speed, clarity, and precision. Today, every organization faces its own battlefields: cyber attacks, regulatory shifts, supply chain chaos, insider threats, economic volatility, and much more. That's where I come in. I take the core principles behind the PDB and translate them into fast, actionable systems for modern organizations. If you want an intelligence office in a box, reach out for a complimentary one-on-one consultation with me by visiting charlesdenyer.com. In our next episode, Her Majesty's Secret Spies Inside MI6, where secrets are currency, loyalty is tested, and the shadows of London stretch deep into the world's deadliest corners. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Charles Denyer, and this is Threat Level Red.
Threat Level Red is a Charles Denyer Productions podcast. For more information, visit charlesdenyer.com to learn more about current and upcoming podcasts and episodes, current and future book publications, professional services offered by Charles, and much more. All opinions expressed are those of the host and do not reflect the official positions of any government agency, military branch, or national security organization.